You've been working on a project with CSJ called the Lost Boys Project, which you have found to be very popular amongst those that you've gone out across the public sector and private sector. And that's despite you thinking, will people want to hear about this because masculinity has such a bad rap?
Yeah.
Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that project, but what it is that you're actually seeing amongst the boys of the United Kingdom and why it's cause for concern.
Yeah. So the sort of genesis of this came from our work with schools, actually. We spend a lot of time with small frontline charities, schools, youth clubs, police, sort of trying to get under the skin of what's really going on out in the country. So the CSJ is quite unusual like that. Although we're a think tank in an ivory tower, we have 800 small organisations we work with who feed into all our policy work. So we have managers in Northwest, Northeast, Yorkshire who will help find the best organisations and help us to understand. And as we were going around the UK, we kept going to people in schools and youth clubs in particular who said there is something going on with our boys at the moment. And it was often a feeling more than anything else. It was a sort of, I can't put my finger on what it is, but I feel they are dropping out, that they are not happy, that there is something going on. And so what we set out to do was try and quantify that feeling, basically. So we went into all the statistics to try and see what is it that people are feeling at the moment. And the Lost Boys report, which came out a few months ago, is really, it's just 70 pages of statistics, really. It's quite a depressing, dry read. But what we found was really quite startling. And I think for me, I'm in my mid-40s, and I think back to when I was at school. And actually, generally, it was pretty good for boys. So in the space of not that long, in the grand scheme of things, it's got really bad. So to sort of give you a quick run through of some of the key things. Going to school. So at the moment, one of the government's key targets is to have 75% of children school ready. When you look at the male-female breakdown, 75% of girls are already school ready. They've hit that target. But in boys, it's only 60%. So right from day one at school, boys are starting behind. And then as they go through school, they will do worse in their SATs. They'll do worse in GCSEs, A-levels, T-levels. Everyone's saying, they're probably, if you do a vocational skills thing, they'll do better. Nope, they don't do anywhere near as well as the girls. They are less likely to go to university. They are less likely to get a good degree at university. They are then more likely to be unemployed or not in education, employment or training. So at every stage, we have a generation now up to the age of sort of their mid-20s where they are behind girls. And I think we then looked at some of the various other external factors around crime, around the internet, pornography and tech, all the various factors in boys' lives that might be contributing to this. And it really makes for quite a bleak picture, I'm afraid. And when, as you say, when we went out with this, we were a little bit nervous. It's not a popular thing to talk about. We spent 50 years fighting for equality and women's rights, and quite rightly so. But actually what we are now hearing on the ground is that is no longer the issue, really, that generally speaking, that is tending to go a lot better than it did. It's not perfect. There's still work to do. But particularly looking at that school age, that sort of 11 to 24-year-old maybe, that there's something going on with men and it's not great. And so that was part one of the report. And we're sort of corralling around part two and looking more at solutions now. We're going to be looking right from the very early years, sort of 0 to 5 through to primary school, into the workplace. What are the things we can be putting in place for young men to try and turn that round?
Well, I don't want to spoil your report, but maybe you could tell us a few of the solutions, maybe one per age range. What do you think we could do to get the ship back on course?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I was to boil it down into something fairly simple. Essentially, the question is, how are we raising or even fathering, metaphorically and literally, our boys? And you have these sort of circles of influence around boys and young men that raise them, and that they will both be taught by, but also see how they behave. And in each of those circles, we're seeing there's just a real lack. So if you start at the very core, that family thing, we've talked a bit about family already. Actually, for half the boys in the country, they don't have their father at home by the time they're 16. So they're sort of navigating through adolescence without a model for what masculinity or being a man looks like. And it's not to say that every father was perfect in years gone by, but the father only 50 years ago was probably there. So you're starting from that really important deficit. And then you go into the next stage, you think, right, well, who's in my community? What are those sports clubs or those teachers or those other men that might be in my life who can mentor me and sort of show me what masculinity might look like. And again, what we're seeing in schools, very few male teachers now, so only about 1 in 3 in secondary school. And a quarter of primary schools have no male teachers at all anymore. So it's very possible now that you grow up as a boy in the UK with no father at home, no male teachers at school, not much engagement in sport anymore, that sort of thing. And so you could easily reach the age of 13 without ever really having had a man in your life now. So you have those growing sort of circles of influence. And then at the top level, what you have is these sort of role model type things. And, Andrew Tate has become the bogeyman of the national role model. But what he's done is he's spoken to some of these boys who don't have close role models to them. And so they're looking around. And when you listen to the likes of Andrew Tate, it's funny, if I sort of got 2 teenage boys, if I say Andrew Tate, they're like, he's years ago now. He's a joke. He's not a serious person anymore. He is. No one takes him seriously. But I think in the public conversation, people understand the type if I say Andrew Tate. When you listen to people like that, about 80% of what they say is pretty good advice. It's sort of, it's that really basic, get out of bed, stop watching pornography, go and get a job, work hard. It then comes with 20% of really unpleasant stuff at the top, which you absolutely don't want. But if nobody is speaking that first 80% into these boys' lives, it's no wonder they're attracted to it. And we used to have exactly this. I mean, thinking back to, go back 20 years, sort of pre-internet, pre that problem. You had exactly the same problem with gangs. Our first ever gangs paper at the CSJ was called Dying to Belong. And it was the same thing. It was these boys who were looking for male role models and they weren't finding them at home or in their schools. But the guy they did see sort of on the estate or wherever it was, who had a car and seemed to be doing stuff, had a girlfriend and all the rest, they were like, well, I want to latch onto him. And that was often someone in a gang, someone who was making some money from dealing or whatever it might be. And it's a very similar thing. And so on that outer level, we get quite fixated on the, well, if we just shut down the manosphere or the internet or whatever it might be, get rid of it and we'll solve this. But what you're seeing is that's the sort of last resort of people who don't have male role models in their community and don't have a father at home and all these different things. And so in terms of solutions, coming back to what it looks like putting men in the lives of young boys in each of these different spheres to raise them to understand what a good model of masculinity looks like. And hopefully we'll sort of get onto the detail of that in the coming months. But as a starting point, that's probably where we're going to go.